Hi, I'm Ken Miller.
And I'm David Erdos.
And welcome to the Erdos Miller New Technology Podcast. We talk about all things drilling tech. Dave, it's the last episode of the season.
Wow, already.
So season 3 will be coming shortly. Big thank you to our sponsor for this season, Gibson Reports. So check them out, gibsonreports.com. Excellent NPT and directional drilling market share reports. It's been a huge help for us, and thank you, David. Okay, also big news, we're hiring. So go check out our website for all the roles we have available. We're always looking for really talented and passionate people to help us change industries. So WITS.
Yes.
So we, like I mentioned, I just couldn't believe we went through the whole list of episodes and hadn't done an episode about WITS, right? So what is WITS? Right? Do you know the official term?
I have it pulled up because I didn't know.
Read it to me.
Well Site Information Transfer Specification.
Also known as the protocol that just won't die, right?
And also just works.
It also just works because it is a testament to simplicity, right? Mm-hmm. So what is this weird WITS thing, right? So this was one of the first projects I had in the industry, right? And WITS is just this really simple, really old protocol for having one machine talk to another machine at the rig site, just right?
Point to point.
Point to point. One machine to another machine. And that's it.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's still used in like every system out there, right?
Yeah.
Every new system. Well, we got to have a WITS port, right? Because we got to talk to other machines, right?
Yeah.
And it's so old. They talk about the oil field being, slow to adopt new technologies. It's still based on an RS-232 serial port, right? It's still like a 1980s serial port, right? Yeah. So like that bright, even today, you go out and you build this brand new control system for oil and gas, NPT, drilling, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And you still got a plan to have a old school RS-232 port in there to talk WITS.
Yeah, virtually no computers have that anymore. You have to have like a USB serial adapter, or some older industrial computers do, of course.
Well, the last generation like laptops we had from Dell did it, but like these new ones, they're trying to copy
on the docks.
Yeah, they're trying to copy Apple and get all cool and less ports, and that port's got to die, right? It's like super old, right? So yeah, it's used commonly to exchange, data between machines. I'll tell you one thing we do every time. We go out and we hook up an NPT surface system to whatever the EDR system is, right? And maybe we should say what an EDR system is too, right?
Yeah.
Electronic data recorder. As far as I know, I've heard other definitions, right?
I think that's correct.
But this is the machine and the set of computers and sensors that monitors the rig on surface, right? So this is commonly provided by Pason and Totco, or I'm getting in trouble for the guys that I'm forgetting. There's a few other ones out there, but those are the big ones that I interface to a lot, right?
And so those measure like top drive, speed, pumps,
everything,
on
right?
rate, everything.
When we go out there with an NPT system, we need to get the depth from the rig and maybe the RPMs and all this other kind of stuff, which we're not going to take the time to rig up our own sensors, right? And so the Pason with the Totco system, the EDR, already has that sensor information. So we're just going to connect to it via a WITS port, and that's it, right? And we'll start exchanging data, right?
Yeah. So does the EDR have a bunch of WITS ports you have like 5 or 10 WITS ports, and you can just plug in as many subsystems as you want?
Well, they charge for them, and you can get more, but they do charge for them, right? So it's not like a USB hub where it's super easy to expand, but there are multiple ports, right?
Yeah.
And so, and that's how it works, right? Now, where it kind of starts to break down is when we have like more than 2 machines that need to communicate, and it gets a little complicated.
Share the same data stream.
Well, they kind of have to pass the data through or whatever else, or you have to just get more ports, and I'll use the EDR system as a hub or whatever else, right? But it's a very simple protocol. Like I said, the physical layer is the RS-232 port, so it's a DB9 connector, right?
Yeah.
It looks like your old school serial port for your printer or whatever, right? And it's a very simple protocol. You can actually go to our website and there's a basic tutorial about the protocol, and there's some information on the specifications. We can put those links at the bottom of the video. And you can get started. And you know what? I mean, it's really kind of a very good, it's a wonderful project when you're first getting into the industry to like write a WITS protocol, right? Because it teaches you about the parameters, that are of interest in the industry, and it teaches you how to, some programming stuff. And I mean, it's something you should be able to figure out in about a week, right? And get that going, right? Now, I do have a story about that. So, I was a young software developer in the industry, and doing a WITS interface was like one of my first projects, right? And I found this old website that had all the WITS documentation, right? And it's a pretty simple protocol, but it was also kind of like strict in the way that it was written. Like floating point numbers should have this many before the decimal point and this many after, and that's it, right?
Because it's ASCII.
Huh?
It's ASCII.
It's ASCII, right?
Yeah.
It's all textual based, right?
Yeah.
So what's the Unicode again? I'm kidding. But And so I wrote all this code. I spent like 2 weeks writing it, and I went out to test it with my first machine, right? And like I was so proud of it because I had adhered completely to the specification, and I expected my code to work the first time because I felt I played by the rules, right? It should work, right? Like and I go out there and I try to connect to a Payson system, and it doesn't work at all. And like, what's going on here, right? And what I came to find out is that nobody plays by the rules. like they all took the specification as a guideline, and just kind of did it a little bit flexibly, right? Like this many data points before this many decibels before the floating point, this many, well, it kind of changes from value to value and whatever, right? So you kind of get a little more flexible. We all agree that there's data packets and like what the IDs are in the data packets, but then what comes in the payload is a little bit
squishy,
nebulous.
flexible.
It's squishy, right? So I had to take all that hard checking code out of my stuff and make it a bit more flexible, and then it worked, right?
Yeah. It's interesting with all these, oil field protocols. They seem to be sometimes like a game of telephone between the different manufacturers. Everybody kind of hears a little different thing and says things a little differently.
Yeah.
On their protocols.
What's funny is like a lot of the standard, I think WITS is like one of the few standards that's actually published that we all adhere to, right? Because like everything in NWD that ends up being standard is just standard because we copied it off of like one guy back in the day, and everybody kind of kept it the same. It's not like we all agreed on a specification, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, if it's so old, why hasn't something replaced it, right?
Yeah, that's a good question. Probably because simplicity.
It's dead simple. It's really simple, right? WITS-ML is a different thing, right?
Yeah.
And what WITS-ML does really well is it gets data off of the rig site back to a server, right? And so that a geologist remotely can look at it and see what's going on, and you can aggregate all the data. It's really good for collecting the data at the rig site and then putting it in an archive, and then exchanging that between different companies or whatever else, right? But what's interesting is like the first version of WITS-ML didn't really address the real-time component, right? And so because they didn't really address inter-machine transfer, right? Or at least the way that they did address it wasn't popular, right?
Yeah.
And so I know that like WITS-ML 2 has like a new thing that they're trying to aim to replace WITS. I haven't really looked into it, but like there are people that are trying to come up with a new protocol, right? I think we do need a new protocol, right? Because we have a lot more machines on the rig site today. They need to exchange a lot more information, and they need to know more about the information, right?
Yeah.
Because the problem with WITS is it makes a lot of assumptions, right?
Yeah.
Because it assumes that whatever you send it happened right then and there.
Right.
And that's it, right? And there's no other way to really tell it anything else. Like, oh, this happened a second ago. Okay, no. There's no messages, there's no events, whatever else, right? So I think we have to. I think that looking at the WITS protocol and looking at how simple it is something that every engineer should look at and really strive and look back to as like a great example of like living KISS, right? Keep it simple, stupid, right?
Yeah.
And so that's really great. But we do need a new protocol, right? And so I know we've been doing some experimentation. We have our net WITS, which is like basically WITS over a network layer so that we can talk over Wi-Fi networks and have multiple things talking to each other, but we kept the simplicity of WITS. I'm sure there's other people out there trying to do stuff, right? And so that's it. I mean, it's not really a long podcast, right? WITS is a simple protocol, right? So for machine-to-machine data transfer to exchange information between these real-time machines at the website, right? So what other questions should we talk about?
I think, I kind of been wondering why WITS-ML and a successor hasn't had greater adoption yet.
Well, I think popularity is like, and simplicity is like, that's my opinion, right?
Yeah. But I can definitely see a benefit to having something networked where you can have every system, talk to every other system and not have to have some, fixed intermediary. And it's kind of limiting in one way.
The rigs have gotten pretty good about having a Wi-Fi network locally there on the rig, right?
Yeah.
Now, the other thing that we're going to have to address as an industry is a lot of people are trying to build things that want to control the rig, right?
Yeah.
And like WITS only handles status,
data exchange,
like what's currently happening. There's no control mechanisms, right?
Yeah.
And there's if you say, okay, I built this machine, I think this machine can drill, you know, right? I think it can control the top drive and whatever else, and you can drill maybe better than another automatic driller or better than a human driller or whatever else, right?
Yeah.
How do you interface that to the rig?
Right. It's gonna have to be custom for every implementation.
Well, I can tell you right now that the first thing that's happened is that whoever owns the rig, their legal department is going to say absolutely not, right? And so I almost wonder if one of the things the industry doesn't need to collaborate on is like some sort of central hub sort of black box that, allows multiple machines to talk to it and, governs the data, right?
Yeah.
And so anything that has been built and tested with this mythical black box is kind of guaranteed to be safe. And like the black box itself does a little bit of safety checks so that you don't tell the top drive to spin at 10,000 RPM or something like that, right? But like just kind of this trusted third-party exchange. And maybe a physical box is not the right embodiment, but something like that, to where we can't every manufacturer going out and testing against every other manufacturer's thing is really
not practical,
right? It's very tiresome, it's complicated, it's expensive, it's time consuming, right? Like if we all just collaborated on this one central point of focus, right? And took into consideration data exchange and control and all these other things, and we all agreed to just build and test to that interface, then maybe we could have things like, a small team, which is really important to me, enabling small teams who are really innovative to do big things, right? Because right now it's just difficult for them to get past the legal aspect, even though they're really brilliant technologists, right? And so I think that could be a really interesting invention that might level the playing field.
Yeah, I definitely think, one thing I've noticed is I think people are generally more collaborative than you might think.
Yeah.
Even competitors, just like with the ICWSA, have all these different companies that are technically competitors coming together and working
for the good of the industry, right?
For the good of the industry.
Yeah.
And developing standards and recommendations for how to improve.
Yeah, there's no reason that couldn't happen on the data exchange side too. So yeah. Okay. Well, I'm out of stuff to talk about on WITS.
Unfortunately, I am too.
Yeah, so we'll stop there for today. So remember, this is the end of our second season. Season 3 is coming up next. And thank you again to our sponsor, Gibson Reports. Check them out at gibsonreports.com for excellent NWD and directional drilling market share reports. And we'll see you next season.